This is PUDDLE Pulverize. After getting my hands on it, I've been able to make it way stronger than the previous version of the build. We're not only dealing billions of damage, but we're also extremely tanky. I can face tank all the attacks from a Pit 101 boss, and that's without stacking much HP. I've updated my early game, mid game, and end game guide, as well as adding a speed farming tab. So no matter what you're trying to do in the game, I've got you covered. Now I'm going to break down all the details of the build, but first, if you haven't already, like, comment, and subscribe. And why don't you drop by my Twitch stream at twitch.tv/screamheart. I'll be playing this build live so you can check it out, and you can ask any questions you might have. So let's start by breaking down how the build actually works. So first off, our main skill is Pulverize. And when you cast your Pulverize, you put down these poison puddles, and that's coming from your Rotten Lightbringer. Now the cool thing about these puddles is that when you continue to slam on top of them, not only are you getting guaranteed overpowers, but you're also triggering those little explosions that you see, which ends up being tons of damage. The weapon itself also has a large chance for Pulverize to hit twice, and a huge willpower percentage increase. So it's honestly already good just for the stats. Now the biggest change between this version of the build and my previous version is that in my previous version, I really wanted to emphasize the damage from the puddle. But what I realized is we don't have enough good multipliers that really work for it. So instead I decided to reorient and focus on enhancing the multipliers for overpowers. And you'll see here that we're doing tons of damage. Now realistically, assuming you actually have the build set up correctly, that's all you really need to know. You can just spam Pulverize and you'll be good to go. You do have to maintain your ultimate, and it's also really worth using your debilitating roar. And I'll get into the details about that in a little bit because I actually use that in an interesting way in this build. But before you actually use your ultimate, you're going to want to get your quick shift stacks up, which means you're going to attack using your claw and your Pulverize back and forth until you see this number here turn to a 6. That means you're at max stacks. Once you're done with that, you can pop your ultimate and you're good to go. You'll see that your cyclone armor disappeared, but don't worry, you're still getting passive damage reduction from it. It's also important to note that this green bar here is your ultimate duration, and it's running down over the course of time. You are going to refresh this a little bit if you get kills or if you overpower a boss, but if you're doing high pits especially, you're going to need to make sure that your duration is longer than your cooldown, because you want to be able to cast it before it ends. If I were to have let it run off there, then it would have started the full cooldown and you'd be in trouble. And you're mostly going to be solving that cooldown and duration issue with tempers on your amulet and your ring. Now, before we get into all the details about the gear and everything, let me show you what I'm doing with Debilitating Roar. So I'm actually using the Celestial Surge Catalyst, and we're putting it on our Debilitating Roar. You'll notice that my Debilitating Roar only has a 13.5 second cooldown because I'm using the Seasonal Jewel that gives me a 25% cooldown reduction on my catalytic skill. Now, the reason why this is so good is because normally when you run this build, you can't really activate your other defensive skills. You'd have to use up rune slots in order to make your bulwark do it, and that would give you better uptime on your backlash, but then you still wouldn't have the good uptime for the 25% damage for Debilitating Roar. So what we're accomplishing with this is our Debilitating Roar has pretty good damage uptime for the 25%, and we're getting pretty good damage uptime for the backlash. It also means that we're syncing all of our good damage multipliers into one moment. And in that moment, we're pulling all the enemies together with our Celestial Surge, while also using our Debilitating Roar, which reduces enemy damage, increasing our damage multiple ways. And basically what this does in practice is that each time you get to a new group of elite enemies, you pop your Debilitating Roar at the beginning, and you start slamming away, and you'll usually kill everything before you even run out of your bonus damage. Of course, they may not fully die if you're in a very high pit, but almost every scenario, this is going to work like magic, and they're just going to melt. So let's actually go through the gear. So for the helmet, I'm recommending Air of Perdition. This is a huge damage multiplier, and it's great for the stats because you get a lot of critical strike chance and core skills. If you're going to use something besides this before you have it, I think Vasilis might be the best all-around option because you're going to get a lot of willpower, but you're also going to get defensive stats like armor and damage reduction, so highly recommended. For the chest armor, I'm going with Shroud of False Death. This is extremely good because it's actually giving you 1 to every single one of your passives in the skill tree. That means Toxic Claws, Envenom, everything. It also allows us to get bonuses that we normally wouldn't go for, like the Safeguard or the Provocation. And the other nice thing about the Shroud is it gives you a bunch of all stats, which makes it easier to hit your bonuses in your Paragon boards. Now, if you don't have the Shroud of False Death, you can just use Insatiable Fury, and it's going to be a really nice alternative. You're going to get multiple skill ranks, and you're going to get an increase to your Keystone passive. For gloves, we're going with Rampaging Werebeast. This is going to extend the duration of your ultimate, which is very important for keeping your uptime, but it's also a 100% damage multiplier as long as you stack it up, so it's very good. For your pants, you're going to go with Tybalt's Will, and these are insanely good for damage reduction. We're talking about 40% damage reduction just from this item. and we're always unstoppable when we're in our ultimate, so it's extremely nice. There's also a damage multiplier on this, which is hard to get in a defensive slot usually, so another really good thing about it. Again, more all stats, which will help you hit your bonuses, but if for whatever reason you don't have Tybalt's Will, just go with some legendary pants here, and that'll give you an extra pulverized size, which is nice for farming, and you can use any legendary aspect that's going to give you more survivability. Or you could even go with ballistic aspect, which will give you 2 more skill ranks. For your boots, you're going to go with Earth Sign Horror, and this is very important because it's making your Pulverize into an Earth skill, which unlocks a ton of our bonuses. Funny story, I was only clearing pit 95, and I was like, what am I doing wrong? And as soon as I realized I didn't have my Earth Sign Horror, and I put it on, I was able to instantly clear at pit 101. And to be fair, I can actually climb higher than that. For your weapon, you're going with the Rotting Lightbringer, obviously, but really try and get your GA on either Chance for Pulverize or Willpower, if not both. And again, for your Masterworks, make sure the bonuses go into those. For the amulet, we're doing Rabid Bear, and as you can see, my amulet is absolutely terrible. So if I can clear a pit 101 with this, imagine what you could do with an amulet that's actually good. For our first ring, we're going with Ring of Starless Skies. Again, if you don't have this mythic, you can always go with Changeling's Debt, and just follow similar stats to what you'd get on your other ring. Ring of Starless Skies is nice because it's giving you resource cost reduction and damage, but it's also extremely good for the raw stats. Tons of attack speed, tons of critical strike chance, and core skills. Extremely hard to beat that. And for our other ring, we're going with Shockwave. And this is not only good for just increasing our damage in general, but it also triggers our puddles from our Rotting Lightbringer, so it's even more damage. Now, if you want to see the specific stats that I recommend you focus on for the build, make sure you click on the link under the video, because you can see all of the stats exactly how I want them in my written guide. For the Spirit Boons, I'm going with Wariness, Swooping Attacks, Avian Wrath, Energize, and Masochistic. If you ever have any spirit issues, feel free to change Wariness over to Gift of the Stag, but this is 15% more damage reduction, and as you'll see from our seasonal powers, we have another way to get spirit over time. Speaking of seasonal powers, good time to talk about them. So we're going with the Corrosive Vapor for our infusion, and then we're going with Bloody Charm, which is really good for executing enemies. Although keep in mind, if you're trying to have really good efficiency for executing enemies, you can change to Disintegrate, but you're not going to have the pull in for enemies, so I'd mostly only recommend that in extremely high pits when you're trying to min-max. We're also going with Fractured Core so we can remove enemy damage reduction. This one's pretty straightforward because enemy damage reduction is extremely annoying. And they're going with Reactive Ooze. Now you might see in other builds that they recommend Sapping Crux, but we actually don't need Sapping Crux because of our runes, which I'll show you here in a minute. So that frees us up to get even better resource regeneration than you normally would. So the reason we don't need to apply the vulnerable with our seasonal powers is because we're using Igni Thule. Igni's going to fill up over time, and it'll get used when you use a non-basic skill. And what this does is it freezes nearby enemies, and it applies vulnerable to them. It also increases the damage we deal to them by 15%, so it's much better than just applying vulnerable. We're actually getting damage, and CC. And then for our other runes, we're going with Ahu Cox. And for this one, we have a lucky hit chance against injured enemies, which means we're going to be proccing this all the time, assuming the enemies are injured and there's enough of them around. And it's going to make us do 100% more damage. You'll definitely see this popping off, and I highly recommend sticking with it. And just a quick mention for speed farming alternatives, you can go with a chest piece with pulverized size, as well as pants with pulverized size. And then the best setup is to run Eridas, which you can swap out for your Starless. And you'll want to change your runes to Yom and Cry. The Yom will go in our lucky hit, and the Cry will go in with our Igni. What this combination will do is make enemies get pulled in constantly with Petrify and Erida's combination, and then they'll also get pulled in by the Cry. So we're just going to non-stop have enemies being pulled towards us, which is extremely good for farming, especially in stuff like Infernal Hordes. For your consumables, I recommend going with Elixir of Advantage, Blessed Guide, Redamine Buzz, and Soothing Spices. Feel free to adjust these depending on your needs. For example, if you needed armor, you could swap out the max life. If you don't have enough all stats for your bonuses in your Paragon board, you can swap out the willpower for all stats. Or if you happen to be lacking in specific types of elements resistances, then you can swap out the Soothing Spices for specific ones. For the skill tree, you're going to put your 2 points in Claw so you can move to the next category. And remember, you're just using the Claw for shapeshifting. We're going to max out our Pulverize and go to Raging Pulverize. We're also going to be maxing out Wild Impulses for damage, Predatory Instinct for crit, and Iron Fur for damage reduction. If you're having spirit issues for whatever reason, you can remove Wild Impulses, but you should put it in whenever you're managing your spirit. We're just dropping the 1 point in Cyclone Armor so we get the passive damage reduction. We're maxing out Backlash for that extra damage. We're maxing out Debilitating Roar and going to Innate Debilitating Roar. And the reason we're maxing this is for more cooldown reduction. We're maxing out Feral Aptitude. And I decided against Nature's Reach here only because we're pulling enemies into a tight ball. But there's definitely places where this might be useful. So if you feel like you can drop some survivability, put points in here instead. We're also maxing out Crushing Earth, Stone Guard, Envenom, and Toxic Claws for more damage, as well as Defiance, Natural Disaster, Resonance, Catastrophe, and Quick Shift for more damage. We're grabbing Heightened Senses for more damage reduction and movement speed. And then we're maxing out our Grizzly Rage and getting both additional points. The max Grizzly Rage is not only lowering your cooldown, but it's also giving you 30% armor, which helps you hit your cap. And then finally for our Keystone passive, we're going with Ursign's Strength, which is giving us a bunch of maximum life, more damage, and more overpower damage, which is extremely good. And just FYI, I did test Bestial Rampage versus the Ursign's Strength, and I definitely prefer the Ursign's Strength over the Bestial Rampage, not only for the survivability, but it definitely chunks more damage, and the extra attack speed from Bestial Rampage wasn't doing as much as I thought it would. For our Paragon boards, we're starting with the Headhunter glyph on our first board. We're moving up and attaching our Heightened Malice board, and here we're going with the Spirit glyph. Moving to the left from there, we're attaching the Survival Instincts board, and we're running Keeper here. Down from there, we're going to attach our Ancestral Guidance board, and here we're running Dominate. And then finally, moving down from there, we're attaching the Earth and Devastation board, and here we're running Fang and Claw. Keep in mind that my boards are relatively slim because I haven't finished leveling up, so I've only gone for the priority stuff. Make sure you adjust your points to go for more resistances if you need them, or more armor as well. And if you want to see all the specifics, click on the link under the video, and I've got an end game version that has every single point put in. And then I have a mid-game version that's much more slim, like my current one. For your mercenaries, I like to go with Rahir and get the resistances, and I go down to Inspiration for more damage. For your reinforcement, I recommend Variana for the attack speed, but as you can see, I'm currently finishing out my leveling for Subo. Now, hopefully I covered everything important. I feel like I forgot some stuff, but I'll get to it next time I put out a video if I forgot it in this one. But I'm going to be spending more time on this build, so come by my Twitch stream at twitch.tv/screamheart, and you can see it in action. And I'll probably spend a couple more days on it until I get it exactly where I want it, and then I'll move to the next thing. So look out for at least one more video on Pulverize here soon, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Daddy Druid out.
Subscribe to Scream Heart. He's more than an old fart. He makes lots of fun builds. I promise his streams chill. He should probably be faster. Come watch this disaster.